Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call our meeting to order. I apologize for the slightly late start. We had a lot to talk about in our executive session. So today is March 8th, 2022. This is a business meeting of the North Kingstown School Committee, and I'd ask if everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Mr. Blasberg.
Here.
Mrs. Hildebrand.
Here.
Mrs. Hoskins. Mrs. Lima.
Here.
Mr. Mather.
Here.
Mrs. Schott. Brooke Thompson. Gabriel Anthony. Thank you.
Okay, and then just a couple little housekeeping points. I just want to make the point that, as people I think know, we finally reached a point where the mask mandate has expired, and I'm not going to be saying anything to anyone. You're welcome to wear one, but they are not required. I also want to make a point that while virtual meetings are still possible, the governor did issue a completely different or partially different executive order that removed the requirement that we provide basically a Zoom option, which allowed us to avoid that issue. We can meet fully in person, and here we are today. Madam Clerk, if you could call the calendar.
Sure. Our next two school committee business meetings are March 22nd and April 12th.
Thank you. And we'll do presentations and recognitions. Dr. Auger, you mentioned you have some recognitions.
Sure, I have a few recognitions tonight. This is a really nice time of year for the school department because it's the end of the winter sports season and it's also the time of the musical. So I guess I'll start with the musical. As you can see, all of this is set up. We did some work to rope this off to make sure that we protect the equipment for this weekend, which means that there are more shows this weekend. If you haven't seen it, come see Mamma Mia. It is absolutely tremendous, as all these musicals are, and can't thank Norma Kayaza enough and her cast and crew and the adults who run the program. It's one of the most amazing things about North Kingstown, and if you haven't seen it, you need to do so. We are certainly not short of athletic champions, and sitting on this stage is Brooke Thompson, the Rhode Island high jump state champion. Congratulations, Brooke. Also, for winter sports and wrestling, Aiden Zarella and Noah Daler both are Rhode Island state champions for their weight class. Aiden is now two-time state champion for the 160-pound Rhode Island weight class, and Noah for the 195-pound weight class. In gymnastics, Olivia Priest is a two-time all-around Rhode Island state champion. Our girls basketball team was the Division I state champions. With Jillian Rogers, the Nairobi hometown hero. And just this week, our boys hockey team became the Division II state champions. So a lot of hard work by our athletes and their coaches, and I commend them all. That's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a couple presentations this evening, so we'll start with the 2022 Rhode Island survey presentation.
Here, they're going to use the screen.
Oh, they're going to use the screen. Yeah. Right. So, folks, if you don't mind, we got the second row. Oh, got it. You're good. You're fine where you are. All right. So we need to move, otherwise the screen's going to hit us in the head because of the sets behind us. So, give us a moment.
Is it on? Yep. Okay, great. Good evening. I'm Kathy Yeager. I'm the coordinator for the North Kingstown Prevention Coalition. Here with me tonight is Heidi Driscoll. She's the director of the South County regional prevention coalition, of which the North Kingstown Coalition is a part of. We're here to ask of you, Dr. Auger, and members of the school committee for approval of the implementation of the 2022 Rhode Island Student Survey. We are asking it to be administered at the high school for all 4 grades there and at the 8th grade level this spring. The survey results are important to prevention work. They guide decisions on effective prevention planning as well as initiatives to help prevent youth substance use and misuse. With that said, I do want to thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and to thank you for your consideration on this request. We're also going to be presenting the results of the 2020 Rhode Island Student Survey. The risk survey is done every other year. All 3 schools were scheduled to administer the survey back in March of 2020. But unfortunately, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, only 1 grade was able to participate before the schools had to shut down. Before I hand it over to Heidi, I just would like to share a little history about the coalitions for those of you that aren't so familiar. The coalition has formally been around since 1987. Municipal Substance Abuse Prevention Task Forces, is what we were called back then, were established and then are funded through the Rhode Island Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Hospitals. 5 years ago, prevention coalitions moved to a regional model. NK is now part of the South County Regional Prevention Coalition. We're funded to do evidence-based programs throughout the region. This change has allowed us to pool our resources and coordinate initiatives across Washington County, making us more effective and efficient in our prevention efforts. Your NK coalition meets regularly to discuss the issues that impact the health and safety of our community. We have members that represent parents, youth, schools, Rhode Island student assistants, law enforcement, faith-based organizations, healthcare, government, business, and concerned citizens. We also work together with our community partners to promote behavioral health across the lifespan. So we work with our local police department, the Office of Family Learning, the NK Rec Department, our libraries, local businesses, and of course the school department, which has been one of our longest and key community partners for 35 years. So now I'm going to turn it over to Heidi, and she's going to present the 2020 RIS, and we'll be here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you so much. As Kathy said, my name is Heidi Driscoll. I'm the director of the South County Regional Coalition. So normally I would love to be showing you middle school and high school data, but unfortunately we all know that something got in the way of that, and that was COVID. So pre-COVID, Wickford Middle School was able to push it out before COVID actually hit. So at least I do have some data to show you from the Wickford Middle School, and it's actually really good data. So just to tell you a little about the survey, this is a survey that's done throughout Rhode Island. It's sanctioned by Rhode Island BHDDH, Behavioral Health Developmental Disabilities Hospitals, Rhode Island Department of Health, and Rhode Island Department of Education. All have onboarded with this. It is done through every city and town in Rhode Island. Last year we had almost 18,000, actually over 18,000 students participate, grades 6 through 12. So the demographics, as I just said, is you had 124 8th graders from Wickford Middle School participate. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to just stop me and ask along the way. The way we usually measure things is past 30-day use. So students are asked in the last 30 days, have you used a particular substance? So as you're looking at this, orange is on the top, that's your 2018 data. compared to your 2020 data. So as you can see, I think one of the biggest, things that jump off the paper to me for this is ENDS, which is your electronic nicotine delivery system. In 2018, we had 18.3% of our youth saying that they have been a past 30-day user. In 2020, we had 4.1%. So it's a little hard to remember back to what was happening before COVID, but it was, if you remember from the news, eVali was all over the news. You couldn't watch a newscast, watch one of the morning programs, the newspaper, without them talking about ENDS, vaping, associated lung illnesses. We had been doing tons and tons of education with all of our youth, and we are very successful with getting that number down. We know that then COVID hit. It's been a long 2 years. We have some more work to do, but we are very confident that we're going to get those numbers back down in the 2022 iteration. So, and alcohol has also gone down considerably to 6.7%. Sure. I really apologize. I am not sure. I assumed it was Wickford Middle to Wickford Middle, but it might not be. You're right. It's probably versus the high school because of the data. Well, I'm going to say, and I'm going to clarify that point, because honestly, our 7th and 8th graders 2 years ago, these were not unheard of numbers. But I'm going to definitely check on that for you. So our typical middle school kids, there was 1 in 4 using 2 years ago electronic vaping. So some of the main reasons that are access and availability, I know this is a little hard to see, but these are things that we're working on. The coalition is working all the time. We work with evidence-based programs such as Media Ready, Strengthening Families, because we know that kids are obtaining items from someone that they know, something on the internet they got from a family member. So these are just some of the main reasons that kids are reporting to us how they're getting access to things. Same with electronic nicotine delivery system and with alcohol. Most of the time they are getting it from someone that they know. Bought from a friend, purchased. So the main takeaway, I think, with this slide, and I know the slides will be available after, is we've seen considerably more kids really thinking it's okay to, start trending away from not being in a car with someone who's driving under the influence. That did tick up a little bit this year, but the good thing is it also went down significantly with marijuana. Now with legalization looming, we're not quite sure where that's going to put us in another year or two, so that'll be something very interesting to see after the 2022 iteration. And I think really one of the other things that's significant is peer and parent disapproval. So a lot of times we'll ask the kids, what would your parents say if? What would your friends say if? So as you can see, the majority of kids, very high ratings for, my parents would disapprove of smoking tobacco, of using drugs, of drinking, using marijuana. So these are all good things. Perception of risk, though, All the numbers are still very statistically high, except when you get down to using marijuana once or twice a week. We see in 2018, 49, almost 50% of the kids thought, not a big deal. 1 out of 2 kids thought, not a big deal. That number has climbed a little bit, which is good. But again, with legalization coming, I am not sure where that's going to put us in the next couple of years. This slide is a little hard to read, so I apologize from a distance. So a lot of times kids are asked about bullying, if it was perpetrated on them or if they've experienced bullying. So we're still seeing very high numbers of children made fun of other people, 43%. Bullied, have you experienced it, been made fun of? Almost 60% of our kids. Just going to let you read for a moment. I'm sorry? I don't think I can enlarge it. I'm sorry. It will be available, correct? It was on the agenda, so it is on the agenda. So, for mental health, I know in the past 2 years our children have experienced a lot of mental health issues. Remember, this was pre-COVID. This was a very small sampling of kids, but it is some good news to look at. At that point, it was 19.8% said they were very sad. Did you feel hopeless about the future? That also is ticking down, which is good news. It'd be very interesting, I think, to see the numbers after the last 2 years. So in this slide, for example, and this is why I had a little hard time telling you the first slide, because this slide definitely reflects all of the high school versus, so you can see in the orange, that's all of the that's all of the numbers of your students that were feeling considered ever attempting suicide, as compared to just the numbers in the 8th grade currently. So this slide does incorporate the entire population. So again, it is good news. Our numbers are going down. I know one of the things that you have at the school is the Rhode Island Student Assistance Counselors are here working with youth. We are doing a lot. We have a mental health block grant that we're working with also to help our students. We're doing things out in the community, alternative activities to have kids make connections, be together. And I know North Kingstown Coalition is running 2 of those events coming up in the next couple months. So thank you. I know it was a very small sampling, so it's really hard to see a big picture for North Kingstown. And that's why I think we're really so excited to get the 2022 data, where we'll really be able to come back to you and give you a little bit more of a picture of what was happening in 2018 versus your high school students compared to what is happening right now in 2022. And it'll be interesting to see after COVID also, the numbers. Are there any questions that I can answer? I will need to check on that. I do not believe the raw data is normally given out to the schools. It's given out more in a presentation like this, but certainly if there were specific questions that you had, we would be able to get that data for you. So it's for confidentiality reasons. 100%, yes. Yes, and we have done that before. When we came last time, we reported out again from Davisville to Wickford Middle School. Yes? So, again, I think we're all aware everything got waylaid because of COVID. We are expecting to have completion done by June of this year, 2022. So all of the data should start rolling out in the fall. So we should have things ready for you. This took so long because it's kind of hard to follow, but we were supposed to do this in the spring of 2020. COVID hit. We offered schools the fall of 2020 to finish. A lot of schools weren't able to finish, obviously. We then offered them until spring of 2021. So that's why this data has been around a while, and I apologize for that, but the state really wanted to get as many students surveyed as possible. Yes. So there is a passive consent that goes out. So after tonight's hopeful approval by the school committee and the superintendent, the next step is that the principal gets looped in, someone from IT gets looped in, they come up with a date, a passive consent goes out, so a parent just needs to opt out of it for their student. And then I'm not sure when it's administered during the school day. It's only about a 20 to 30 minute, not even 20-minute survey for the kids. A lot of schools do it during advisory. So it's pretty quick. There are skip patterns. So if a child is putting, nope, I don't do this, they're skipping things. Great, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I apologize for the delay there, but those of you that are not aware of two-factor authentication, it requires me to verify on my phone that I'm trying to sign in when I haven't signed into a new computer. So I strongly recommend that for any of your passwords. My name is Michael Waterman. I am the Director of Technology for the North Kingstown School Department. Tonight, this presentation will be a recap on our last 5-year strategic plan, and some highlights of where we're going for the next 5 years. In the agenda packet tonight is the actual 5-year strategic plan that has many more details. I'm just going to recap on some of the highlights tonight. So over the last 5 years, pre-COVID, if you think about it, we really started a lot of the work and a lot of the professional development around the Google Suite, the Chromebooks. 2016-17 was the first year where we rolled out our Chromebooks to all of our students. So we continued along our path of professional development, not only in the Google Suite, but also a lot of the online digital tools that were starting to be developed. And we were training the teachers in how to utilize those in their classrooms, how to implement them with their students. We provided mobile devices to all staff and students, and just last year we had a large refresh of those devices where our staff members, it became evident our staff members needed more powerful devices, so we were able to provide them with Windows-based laptops, which allowed them to host a Google Meet while teach, in some cases, students that were sitting in front of them and students who were distance learning, or in some cases, students who were completely remote, or as we all know, during March of 2020, full remote for everyone K-12. Through the E-Rate program, which is an FCC program, we were able to upgrade our Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi has evolved over the years, and we're able to upgrade all of our access points, including adding outdoor access. So all of our buildings have outdoor access to allow for outdoor learning spaces and outdoor classrooms. The IT department was reorganized and restructured so to better meet the changing needs of less desktops and computer labs, more mobile devices. We adopted a learning management system, Canvas. We're currently in our second full year of implementation. Last year, it became evident to us during the COVID that the Google Classroom was a tool to help organize assignments, whereas Canvas is our tool to help drive our instructions. You can do everything from keeping your grades in Canvas, sharing content among classes so that if we have 3 or 4 teachers all teaching Algebra 1, X and Y are only represented so many different ways. It allows the teachers to share resources and develop additional resources. We made technology-based security enhancements throughout the district. We consolidated our server rooms so that we didn't have servers in each schools. And one of the major things we did during the 2017-18 was all of our buildings were wired with high-speed fiber optic cable. So we were able to reduce each school site from needing an individual data closet or server room to 2 main hubs that have backwards redundancy. So if one path gets cut off, there's another path to a data closet. And that has allowed us to reduce the number of physical devices, which when you're talking about cybersecurity and patching, it helps make us more efficient. We've been refreshing classroom technology on an as-needed basis. This is one of the things I was hoping that we would be able to take more steps in, and I have the note break fix. And that's very simple. When something breaks, we fix it. What I was hoping to do, and a major feature of what you're going to see in the plan I'm going to present tonight, is I want us to proactively upgrade our classrooms, and I'll get into that in just a moment. We incorporated card access with print release, which simply means you can print from any computer in any district, in any building in our district, and you can go to any copy machine and you can release it. So for confidential documents, educational records, that helps reduce folks having to run to the printer to make sure that their documents are there, or if you're printing a test, to make sure that it doesn't get picked up. So that's where we've been in the past 5 years, and here is where we are hoping to go with our next 5-year plan. So our original plan integrated the ISTE standards for students and educators, and those standards were updated in this plan to the latest version. The plan has us adding a second technology ed teacher. So right now, for the district, we have 1 tech coach, and that's not a person who works with kids directly. That's somebody who's working with the teacher, so when they want to implement a new tool, revise their craft, we have 1 of those for about 375 teachers. I'd like to see us add another one to help lessen that one person's load. Right now, that person's doing a lot of spreading of information, but doesn't have as much time as she'd like to have to actually focus and work on teachers who need help. We will continue to plan and implement a professional development program that's aligned with curriculum, instruction, and assessment. A lot of what we're doing in this plan, and this has been the trend, is working with the curriculum office, so technology and curriculum are now embedded side by side and together. Continue to embed digital citizenship into daily instruction, and that's through, boy, now I'm drawing a blank. Not code. It'll come to me, and I'll revisit that one. Continue to provide mobile devices to all students and staff. So the Chromebooks have a shelf life. Our current plan is students get issued a Chromebook when they're in first grade, and they keep that device through fifth grade. And then when they enter sixth grade, they will be issued a new device, and they'll keep that one for 3 years. And then in ninth grade, they'll be issued an additional device. We have found, and our tickets support this, that the middle schoolers are traditionally incredibly tough on devices. I have a middle schooler, so not only do I see it in the office, but I see it at home. We would like to reimagine a student help desk program. So in our early years, we actually had a class that was run out of the high school where the kids would come down and they would work in our department. Over the years, the enrollment in that class was not as high as was originally hoped. So what we've done is we've reframed it. So the kids in the CTE, the IT program at the high school, they need certain real life experience. So what we've been doing is about 2 at a time. They come down and they complete their hours in our office, and they get to learn everything from ripping apart a Chromebook to then reassembling it. They get to learn networking. They get to learn all the different facets of technology, and it really opens eyes as to how much technology is embedded in everyday life that we just don't always recognize. Cybersecurity is not new, but it's an ever-evolving cat and mouse, where we are continuing to have to upgrade policies, but also hardened protection. This was the one that I had alluded to that I was hoping. In the last plan, we were looking at upgrading and refreshing our interactive boards. So in our elementary schools, about 95 to 99% of our classrooms all have some type of interactive board, meaning the teacher goes to the front of the room, they touch a board, and it reacts. Once you get to the middle and high school, we're below 50%. So in the last plan, what we were doing is we were upkeeping that structure. What I'm hoping in this new plan is that over the course of 5 years, we have 300 classrooms in the district. Each year, we're purchasing 60 boards to not only replace the boards that we have in classrooms, but also to provide boards in the classrooms that don't. So this way, when a teacher goes into a classroom, every classroom has the same technology. We have teachers that have to travel from one classroom to another, and in this classroom, they may have access to this technology, whereas in other classrooms, they have access to a completely different technology. So while they could be teaching the same course, they have to teach it differently based off of the classroom that they're in. So this plan is not reactive, but it's proactive to have equity across our schools and also within the schools. Mobile hotspots. During our COVID times, the lack of internet for some of our families was problematic. We were fortunate that right away, Governor Raimondo was able to work with the cell phone providers, and if you think back, they turned on hotspots, so if your phone had hotspot, even though you didn't have the plan, they activated it. As time went on, that backed off. Cox has a program, Cox 2 Connect, which provides internet to families who receive free and reduced lunch, but there are certain stipulations on that program where you can't have a back balance, you must qualify. Providing hotspots allows us in a moment, if a child has an emergency and has an issue where they can't be in their house and they're going to be staying at a hotel, we can provide them with a hotspot that we know is going to work with our device, and it allows immediate access and no child goes without. Once again, during this 5-year plan, as unfortunate as it is, our wireless infrastructure will be deemed too old, and part of it being deemed too old doesn't mean that it won't work, any longer, but what it won't get is it won't get the updated security patches, and that ties into our cybersecurity. As part of our consolidation of our servers, we were able to go from about 3 server racks in a room to 1 rack that does everything we need it to do with built-in redundancy. So at some point during this plan, probably in year 4 and 5, that hardware will also need to be refreshed. And the major part of this plan, and I want to say it's the last page or two, gives the school committee a predictable and reliable purchase schedule. So that when we first came on, we purchased 4,000 Chromebooks all at once. And then we knew 4 and 5 years later, we were going to need to make that purchase again. This plan breaks that down so that every year we have a predictable annual cost. Some questions that I've received since the agenda went out that I'd like to address. You'll see in some portions there'll be an action item and it will say no cost. What that means is there's nothing that we need to bring forward as a purchase. It means it's something that we're going to be able to do in-house, so there's no monetary cost. Of course, time is money, but in this case, it's not something where we'll be looking for any approval. Some of it is stuff that can happen during our professional development days, stuff that's already built into our schedule. Each year, I come forward to the school committee and do an annual review. This year just happens to be, it's our 5-year look back and our 5-year look forward. But next year, I'll be back here to address what we've done in year 1 of the plan that the school committee will be voting on tonight. If approved tonight, there's no purchase being made. I think that's something that's important to point out. I'm not asking for any purchase. What I'm asking for is an approval of the plan so that I can go out and get bids and then bring the purchases back to the school committee. So no purchases will be made off of a vote tonight. One of the major components that we are peeling back right now is Canvas, which is our learning management system. Last year, we used this system very similarly to how we use Google Classroom, which was to push out assignments and collect assignments. This year, you'll see there's more reliable and predictable use. The teachers are much more comfortable with it, so they're using it more often. At the highschool's begun with the second semester, keeping all their grades in Canvas, and then what they'll do at the marking periods is they'll push those grades up into Aspen. Next year, we plan on rolling that out to the middle schools as well. There are also tools built into Canvas where teachers can create, they call them blueprint courses, where a group of teachers can create one course, share it amongst the teachers that created it, and then they can individualize it and make it their own, thus allowing them to focus more on their instructional practices versus actually putting together materials. And that is it for any of the questions I had. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for both presentations. So the next item on our agenda is citizens' comments. There's a sign-up sheet. I have the first page. Ms. Basil, is there another one down there anywhere? Anyone else? Okay. So if you haven't signed up and would like to speak, you can sign up. Please put your name and address. We always ask if you could please limit your comments to 3 minutes, and I will call people in order. When you come to the microphone, just again for the video and for the assistance of our clerk as she prepares the minutes, if you could speak your name and address, including the town, for the record. So the first is Kathleen Layton, and I also apologize, that was an easy one, but if I mispronounce your name, I apologize. Okay, yep, we'll grab them, yep. And feel free to adjust the microphone to wherever it needs to be, up or down as needed. And if you could just tap it, let me just make sure it's working. Not yet, so you might need to flip the switch. Chaz, can you help her out? Yep, 1 second.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Layton, and I live at 17 Pilgrim Drive in North Kingstown. I have had the best time over the last few days. On Saturday, I cheered on the high school hockey team. On Sunday, I checked out the amazing Mamma Mia performance at the high school. After school today, my DMS student attended an event and fundraiser for Malawi children. And tonight, I am here amongst so many people who care about the school department. I think of the North Kingstown School Department as the heart of our town. It pulses with education, athletics, culture, philanthropy, and social events. No, you don't even need to have a child in the system to reap the benefits. My kids are not on the hockey team, they're not in the play, but I attended both events to enrich my family's life. I ask that the school committee please vote to use an outside vendor to conduct a district-wide equity assessment, because as the pulse of this town, we need to be sure that we are doing the ultimate best that we can do. In researching equity audits, of which I did not know a lot, I am participating in the United Way of Rhode Island's 21-day equity challenge. Everybody here can do the same. It's right on their homepage, register. It's a 21-day challenge. It comes right to your inbox, and it's filled with reading materials and quizzes you can take and videos you can watch. I learned so much. I'm a very liberal person, and it's benefited me so much. And what really resonates is that DEI is about more than race. It's about more than gender and sex. It's about class and social economic status, conventional beauty standards, religious persecution. It's ultimately about feeling safe in one's surroundings. We owe it to our students and staff to learn how we are doing as a school department in this regard. In closing, one of the many social media dislike groups aimed specifically at criticizing the school committee and people like myself is aptly named Fixing a Broken System. While I don't think our system is broken, I think conducting an audit is certainly a good idea to start to fix a broken system. Thank you very much, and definitely go see Mamma Mia. It was the best 3 hours in recent memory.
Thank you. Next speaker would be Kalia Schmer.
Thank you. My name is Kalia Schmer. I live at 383 West Allenton Road in North Kingstown. I am speaking tonight in support of the equity audit proposal. I've read the proposal, I've asked questions, considered the cost, and personally concluded that it is in the best interest of our community for this audit to take place. I have personal reasons to support this kind of work, namely that I'm neurodivergent, I'm Jewish, I was raised in a single-parent household, and as such, school was not always a comfortable or productive place for me. I expect many people have had that kind of experience and look back wishing their schools could have recognized how such factors can impact education and had done something about it. We have an opportunity to recognize it and do something about it in our community right now. We have the opportunity right now to uncover what, if anything, isn't working, what's working well, how things could change for the better. We have an opportunity now to take an important step on behalf of the students in this town to ensure their education works for all of them. In September 2021, this school committee rightfully approved a $500,000 ESSER funding for suicide prevention measures to benefit about 30 students. I thought that was an admirable decision, and I'm deeply grateful that this group of elected officials prioritizing the mental well-being, the lives of 30 students over the $500,000 price tag. It sent a message that the health and safety of students transcends financial burden. I urge you now to act in that same spirit to approve the $73,000 of ESSER funds for this equity audit, something that would benefit everyone in the North Kingstown School Department, students and staff, present and future. Lastly, there are many people in this room tonight, and I urge everyone, whether they are here to support or oppose this audit, to listen carefully and thoroughly to what Ms. Lima has to say about it. You may hear her explanation and still disagree with it, but at least you will know for sure what it is you disagree with. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Matthew McCoy.
Good evening. I'm Matthew McCoy, live at 381 Potter Road in North Kingstown. I come before you this evening to advocate for your approval of the obligation and expenditure of elementary and second school emergency relief ESSER funds to conduct a thorough, rigorous, and adequate diversity, equity, and inclusion community assessment as outlined in North Kingstown School Department's request for proposal 2022-08. I've reviewed the RFP and the two proposals that were received in response to it. It is my opinion that the public consulting group's proposal will deliver the best results. I think that the $73,000+ is a fair and reasonable bid for the scope and services which will be provided. I commend the DEI subcommittee for their efforts and commend the entire North Kingstown School Committee for their sustained and unwavering commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion in North Kingstown schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Natalie Coletta.
Good evening, and thank you all for serving in this meaningful and important position that you're in. And thank you for giving me the time. So my name is Natalie Coletta. I live at 31 Loop Drive in North Kingstown. The results of the 2021 U.S. Census was revealing. The majority of people under the age of 18 checked boxes other than white, quote unquote, from the New York Times. Meaning the majority of people under the age of 18 for the first time since the country was peopled by indigenous Americans is now characterized as multiracial, Hispanic, Asian, or Black. In North Kingstown, we live in an overwhelmingly white community with a pressing and overlooked need to equip our youth with the ability to understand the nuances of living in a town, or more so, a state and a country that is vibrant with difference. Students who graduate from North Kingstown High School and our system in general enter the workforce or enter into higher learning with experience that need to experience that diversity. Graduating our youth with healthy, kind minds is a noble responsibility. And as educators and education leaders, we are responsible to shoulder that work. Most work required for change is the time and effort invested in ahead of actions needed to create safer, inclusive learning cultures. It's in the conversations, the research, the data collection, the disaggregation of data, the recommendations and the forthcoming trainings, and the reiterations and assessments required before programs can be rolled out that's so critical. And this is exactly what the assessment work would be about. It takes time and it takes money to do this well. Such work is made more complex by the insidious use of social media and the slights, the exclusions, the ridicule, and sometimes the direct attacks that victimize our youth. The complexity of our time requires an investment that all of our kids deserve. So spending this money to protect and educate our youth is our responsibility as their elders. I support this cost as a parent. I have 2 children who graduated from the system. I support this as an educator myself, and I support it as a taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tiffany McLeod.
Tiffany McLeod, 170 Brookhaven Road at North Kingstown. First, I want to touch on something I noticed during the last meeting. Jenny and Jake, I find it rather disturbing you were both in tears over the fact that people are voicing their opinions on your job performance lately. I'm sure you're really stressed from being under federal investigation, but that's no one's fault but your own. You were asked to resign, you stayed, so please do us all a favor and stop with the crocodile tears. You have all been on the receiving end of a lot of hate lately. Parents are angry at you. I know you guys don't like me and the feeling's very mutual, but believe me when I say I wish I could stand up here and say thank you for keeping my son safe and doing whatever you possibly could to protect him from harm, whether it be a virus or a predator. But I can't, because you haven't. Instead, I come here on the first Tuesday of every month, frustrated, hurt, and angry. So the next time you want to start crying in response to a few parents calling you out specifically, I want you to remember this. You need to give respect to get respect. Instead of keeping them safe, you're putting them in direct danger, willingly and for political theater. Since you're such a fan of uncomfortable conversations, Jen, let's have one. On average, there are 800,000 reports of sexual misconduct on a student in the public school system every year. 1 in 10 children will experience sexual misconduct by a school official by the time they're 18. Allowing this type of curriculum in these kinds of books makes it pretty damn easy for a pedophile to prey on children. And God forbid, say that does happen. Oh wait, that did just happen, and it was allowed to continue for years because your boss wanted some bonuses and awards. If the allegations are true, there are possibly hundreds of students who are sexually abused by Aaron Thomas, and to date, none of you have taken responsibility or been held accountable. Jen, you stood outside that meeting with your Black Lives Matter mask on because you couldn't possibly put your extreme left-wing activism aside for a few hours and make this about something other than yourself. You've lost sight of what it means to be a school committee a long time ago. Phil, you are the worst kind of human being. You've shown zero empathy to a town that is filled with students and parents who are broken over this. I really hope those bonuses were worth it. You are more concerned about gender-neutral bathrooms than you are about plummeting test scores or the victims of Aaron Thomas. It's not exactly rocket science coming to the conclusion that you aren't the best group of people to be in charge of our children. I refuse to spend any more Tuesday nights away from my family in the same room as you spineless cowards, begging you to do the right thing. I've lost trust in this school system, and trust me when I say I never thought I would utter those words in my beautiful hometown. I don't like you, I don't respect you, and I can't trust you. I will be withdrawing my son from the school system at the end of the year. It's my hope that others do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Diane Hill.
Diane Hill, Heritage Road, North Kingstown. I'm testifying in support of the DEI audit. I am the grandmother of 2 children who attended Forest Park Elementary School and a licensed clinical social worker. In my professional career, I worked for 36 years as the school counselor at a predominantly white, independent boarding school for girls in grades 8 through 12. In 1996, because of student interpersonal tensions, the head of that school worked with me to implement a DEI program. I've seen firsthand how valuable and growth promoting a good DEI program can be. Such a program opens constructive dialogue and increases understanding about people who are the same and different than us. And not just in terms of race, but also ethnicity, religious affiliation, class and economic background, physical and mental ability, age, gender, sexual orientation, and gender identity and expression. We are all born eager to learn and connect with each other, and we have all been exposed to stereotypes and misinformation about people who are different than us. The goal of a DEI program is to be welcoming to everyone and to foster awareness of how our own life experiences impact and limit our perspectives so we can build a world in which we can live in peace. In the 21st century, when the world is so interconnected, it is essential to educate young people to be global citizens. I want them to feel excited to learn about people who are different than them and expand their respect and appreciation for the richness of our multicultural society. For me, both professionally and personally, DEI work is a lifelong journey. As part of continuing education to maintain my professional license, the Rhode Island Department of Health requires at least 3 hours every 2 years in, quote, cross-cultural practice to include the alleviation of oppression, unquote. For me personally, it feels important to be a better ally to people who are different than me, especially to learn what things I might say or do that unintentionally are hurtful to others. The DEI audit is an important first step to make certain that every student in North Kingstown feels heard, seen, and valued. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Mary Lou Sanborn.
Hi, my name is Claudine Sharon, and I'm actually going to speak on behalf of Mary Lou Sanborn, who had to leave this meeting early, if that's okay.
Yep, you just get one shot to speak, but yes, that's fine.
Okay, so I got to give up my own shot
Yep.
for something different? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
I'm afraid so. Yep, each person gets one turn. Yep.
Okay. She actually sent you an email, I guess all of you an email, on March 3rd, and then her narrative is this.
Could you just speak her name and address for the record?
Sure, it's Mary Lou Sanborn, and she is at 21 Bayview Drive, Jamestown, Rhode Island.
Thank you.
Several days ago, I emailed a letter to you opposing the support of an equity audit in NK. In summary, I suggested the components of the audit be included as part of an NEASC review where the outcomes are measurable, not equitable. Based on Ms. Lima's letter to the editor in the Providence Journal, I am convinced more than before that the components of an equity audit should be included as part of the NEASC review. The NEASC team is professionally trained, not self-certified or self-trained, as are the members of an equity audit. Many years ago, Hartford County in Connecticut endorsed an equity project that turned out to be very expensive with too little positive results. Endorsing such an audit is setting a precedent for other audits of this type and is not good school policy. The roadmap for such an audit would be a bumpy, rocky, and extremely expensive one with little, no, or proper impact on the students. I respectfully request that you oppose the support of the equity audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Brian Odell.
Brian Odell, 152 Salisbury Avenue. Tonight you'll be voting on the equity audit proposed by the DEI subcommittee. There are several rational reasons for you to reject it. First is the cost. You'll be spending an extravagant amount of taxpayer funds to hire an outside firm to do work that you are chartered to do yourselves. Interestingly, at the last DEI subcommittee meeting, the members actually debated that very point. They admitted there was analysis they could be doing themselves, but decided to rush the full proposal to a vote tonight anyway. Based on this alone, you should reject the proposal and make them go back and do the work they even admit that they should be doing themselves. But that's just procedural. The real problem is the overall cost. It's not just the initial price tag that is irresponsible. That's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what follows in costly training programs and new curriculum materials. As you're well aware, you just paid over $500,000 for new curriculum materials. The DEI subcommittee knows this. They debated that point too. But again, they chose to push the vote tonight without even removing the $10,000 curriculum analysis from the audit. They also decided not to ask the audit company to provide any sort of impact analysis about possible future costs. That's irresponsible. At these very meetings, you've expressed your own dire warnings about future school budgets and the changing landscape of school allocations. You're already going out of bounds asking for a maximum 4% budget increase next year, and all of that is separate from what might happen should the Aaron Thomas victims win their case against the town or if Rhode penalizes you. If you are indeed thinking about the big picture, the audit should be rejected. It's unsustainable. and taxpayers are in no mood to pay more. And have you thought about the impact DEI programs have on school excellence? Others have. Perhaps you saw that nearly 6 UMass science and math professors recently signed their names to an open letter criticizing the school for prioritizing DEI activism over the school's primary purpose of academic excellence. Or maybe you saw the recent Manhattan Institute survey that found 2/3 of parents support removing DEI-focused lessons from the public school curriculum, including 61% of Hispanic parents and 54% of black parents. And certainly you must have noticed what's happening in the Providence schools. The DEI-focused curriculum has been an unmitigated disaster. Attendance is down. Teachers are leaving in droves. Students now ignore the Pledge of Allegiance. Some students identify as mutes, and teachers allow them to skip class participation. Others identify as cats and actually meow in class. Certain other students are allowed to show up late, miss homework assignments, and leave class without permission. Where has this led? Only 9% of 8th grade boys and 16% of 8th grade girls are proficient in reading and writing, and the numbers are getting worse, and it's not just because of COVID. Okay, so NK is not Providence, right? But this could be the beginning of the fabric unraveling here. Already, NK students report that not all teachers are required their advisory classes to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance like we did tonight. The dress code might be changing to allow girls to wear revealing halter tops and pajamas to school. You're not wearing pajamas, right, at this professional engagement?
I have to ask you to please wrap up.
Teachers have been told they need to pass. What about another pornographic book that has become required reading at the NK high school sophomores? Students who found this objectionable and asked to opt out were told no. Isn't that a violation of your own principle? One last thing. All of this has me worried about my granddaughter who is white. One of her best friends at preschool is a black
Do you need to
student.
wrap up, sir, please?
I'm afraid DEI is going to ruin their friendship. I'm also worried about my grandson. Boys are underperforming in NK schools, especially at Davisville. DEI will
Okay,
not
sir,
help
you've
them.
exceeded your time.
He deserves academic excellence, not politics.
Thank you. Next is Ramona Bessinger.
My name is Ramona Bessinger. I live at 437 Davitt Avenue in Jamestown. I would urge the committee to table the DEI equity audit. The current approach from the DEI subcommittee is well-intentioned, but it is flawed. You have no right to make such drastic, permanent, social, cultural, and academic changes to the schools here at NK. You have not provided any metrics or rubrics, nor have you discussed how this audit will yield measurable outcomes. In fact, there are no measurable outcomes from the past audits, except, of course, if you consider the failing schools around Rhode Island that have conducted equity audits and implemented their programs. School districts like Providence, Pawtucket, and other urban communities where equity audits were supposed to provide a miraculous solution to close the reading, writing, and math gaps. Equity audits in urban communities have created bigger academic deficits, racial divide, and a mass exodus of teachers leaving the profession. What is left in the wake of any equity audit is total destruction, and we see this all over the country. Children and families will suffer much more than prior to the equity audit. Equity audits also cost millions of dollars. The $73,000 price point is only for that initial phase. Beyond that, it will be millions. The auditing company's sole purpose is to sell curriculum, to sell professional development, and to move their own army of teachers, administrators, curriculum materials, political affiliates into the community and schools. The changes will damage schools, dismantle the faculty, and create irreparable harm to our children and our teaching and learning community. You claim to have data that supports the decision, but that is a lie. You have no data, and the data you are using is being interpreted to suit your own political agendas. An example of this would be the RICAS scores. RICAS, or PARC prior to RICAS, was historically showed deficits in learning. That is the purpose of state testing, to provide data to schools so they can implement gap analysis and discuss how to close those gaps with teachers and administration. It is not the job of a private, for-profit, biased, political affiliated equity audit company to conduct these sorts of audits. They do not work. Look around the country and you will see social unrest, rage, anger. It doesn't work. Nice in principle, but these audits are a failure. And before we go into an expensive equity audit that will cost...
I have to ask you to please wrap up.
Excuse me, that will cost the taxpayers millions of dollars, you need to reconsider this and consider the consequences and not just your own personal, political affiliations and aspirations.
Thank you. Next is Claudine Shannon, I think. Sorry if I got that wrong. Oh, you got it. Sorry, thank you very much. Okay. So, Mary Warbeck.
Hi. My name's Mary Warbeck, and I live at 25 North Road, North Kingstown. Having moved here in the 70s, lived here for 20 years, started our family in the school systems here, moved to Florida, and then returned to Rhode Island because it is in our hearts. We returned to find a much more diverse Rhode Island than when we left here. Before us today, our schools are seeking ways to unfold our increasingly diverse student population into a more inclusive environment. Are we succeeding? When one of our daughters was very little, she returned home from school one day and said, "I have good news and bad news." "Oh, really, Katie?" I said. "How so?" "The bad news is I failed my math exam. But the good news," she said gleefully, "is they were all careless mistakes." Are we making mistakes for lack of careful examination of the unique abilities and needs of our student populations? Are we failing the exam, in the words of my little daughter, by not putting in the careful examination? I have talked with two of our daughters who are teachers about challenges and opportunities in our schools. Many of these are not even on my radar. After all, you don't know what you don't know. The issues involved are many and varied and complex. For example, in talking to my daughters, looking at gender, there's the decades-old question of whether we encourage boys more than girls to actively participate in class. Do we praise or compliment girls more often for their appearance than their actions? Do we place, and this was a situation with one of my daughters, an all-gender bathroom on the top floor of a school for older students, not recognizing gender identity can be established at a very young age? Are extracurricular activities available to students who must race home after school to report to a job or to watch younger siblings? Today, public schools are one of the first and the few environments where kids are exposed to increasingly diverse settings. Think on that. Those of us who are in the majority are more often surrounded by our own norms and, interestingly, may find it uncomfortable or even hard to adjust to situations different from our own. I've read the request for proposals, and I'm excited for our school system to have an audit conducted to examine conditions and procedures and to develop new skill sets which allow everyone to feel more comfortable in our increasingly diverse world. Not only students, but also we parents will become fuller and more fulfilled. and we will pass this on to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Georgine Edwards.
Georgine Edwards, 24 Saunders Road, Saunderstown, North Kingstown. As usual, I didn't put it in writing. I did write you all an email, and I hope that has become part of the public record about how much I support equity audits, and the one I underwent once when I myself was a teacher. In general, I'm just standing up to repeat my support, to thank you for your work, to tell you I'm amazed at how well you're getting your work done, given the hatred and animosity that has been facing you the whole time, especially this year. And please know, despite all the voices raised against you, that there are so many people who look at you in admiration, who wish that people had gotten started on these kinds of initiatives a long time ago. And so all I can say is, thank you for your thank you, and I'm sorry for all the hatred.
Thank you. Next is Noline Thompson.
Good evening. My name is Noline Thompson, and I live at 5 Seagrass Way, North Kingstown. And I'd like to speak tonight to urge the school committee to vote in favor of the equity audit. Over the past few months, multiple people and groups have called out the school superintendent and the school committee members for not being more proactive in probing into the questionable and reprehensible behavior of Coach Thomas. These critics have demanded that the school committee take any and all steps in their power to protect our precious kids. So I find it ironic, if not hypocritical, that many of these same individuals are now vehemently against taking proactive steps to surface and rectify any discriminatory practices in our schools that might harm many of those same precious kids. The equity audit isn't the perfect answer, but neither's denial. Every human and every human system has its blind spots. The old saying goes, we don't know what we don't know. The equity audit simply begins a rational process by a reputable organization to identify the blind spots in our school system's processes and culture. The results will give the school committee a real-time snapshot of the educational processes and practices that may be harming our kids by undermining their achievement and denying them equal opportunities. I'm very aware that I might not like some or all of what the audit reveals, but I'm willing to support a rational process that will give the school committee what it needs to put appropriate steps in place to either rectify harm or remove barriers to performance for every kid in our school system. And as a community, I think we owe it to our kids to shine a light on our values and on our commitment to addressing our blind spots. Finally, I'd like to remind everyone that the people who are protesting this equity audit are loud and vocal, and they would like you to think they represent the majority of North Kingstown voters. But the election data says otherwise. In the 2020 election, candidate Jen Lima was quite transparent about her intentions to explore diversity and equity. She was elected to the school committee with the highest number of votes. And last year, when another group tried to collect votes to recall her, they failed. The data speaks for itself. North Kingstown voters do support what Ms. Lima and the school committee and the DEI committee are proposing. So I urge the school committee tonight to be courageous and to support the equity audit. Our schools and our entire town will be healthier and stronger if you do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Susanna Tingley.
Good evening. Susanna Tingley, 750 Hatchery Road. Taxpayer dollars should not be used to fund political ideologies in schools, and I ask you to oppose this equity audit. Public Consulting Group, a for-profit organization, cannot perform an objective evaluation. The same company looking for the problems wants to sell the solutions. This is a cash grab for the last of the ESSER funds. The ESSER 3 survey of NK stakeholders sent out the week of Christmas with only 200 responses did not contain questions related to an equity audit. Is it legal to leverage ESSER funds to implement an audit that stakeholders did not solicit? Hiring PCG is premature and it outsources work that should be done by the administration. During a recent DEI meeting, members discussed that it would be more cost-effective to use existing district data and wondered if there really is a need for an outside curriculum review, as we already have curriculum reviews, and NK has a high-performing, rich curriculum with wit and wisdom purchased just last year. They shared that NK has high-quality teachers who are professionally educated, not emergency certified. Basically, the DEI discussed how most of the work of this audit can be done in-house. The DEI was tasked to review data, the district's plan, and set goals. Where is the DEI's plan? They have not presented a single report or analysis to justify a massive expenditure or audit. Have they looked at XQRI or the risk and prevalence survey, which can filter by race and gender? The head of HR sits on the DEI, but where is an affirmative action report with employee demographics? Neither the DEI or the school committee have used the data, systems, and committees such as SIT and CELAC to produce improvements. This work should be done by the leadership of the district. 4 DEI members were absent from the equity audit vote, and 1 school committee member abstained because he felt the bids should be more competitive and the vote was rushed. The school committee needs to develop a data-based plan while holding the administration accountable to address your goals. Schools with equity audits invest massive amounts of money that do not improve student outcomes. We need measurable goals, not social justice. Reject the DEI's proposal and keep our classrooms free of political agendas that dishonor every family who trusts you with their children's education. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Beisel. Next is Peter Cornelian.
Hi, Peter Cornelian, 139 North Road, Saunderstown. Having listened to many of the public comments at the school committee meetings, it's clear to me that a DEI community assessment is necessary. Statements to the effect that there is no problem, that there have been virtually no formal complaints with regard to gender, race, or ethnic issues in the town, so why do we need an assessment, go to the heart of the need for one. I must admit that when I started attending the school committee meetings, I was skeptical, but the comments on both sides of the issues forced me to think more deeply about it. In doing so, I've come to realize that although unintentional, I have biases which are in some cases quite strong, and that my behavior was not as tolerant as it should have been. I would be amazed if most of us do not have such biases. In fact, our survival often depends on preconceived notions. Our brains are wired this way. Our responses to things depend on our history, how our particular brains work. One person may be afraid to go swimming for fear of sharks, while their sister may not perceive sharks as a threat at all. Similarly, with regard to how we view people who are different from us, we have preconceived notions related to their feelings, their behavior, and their intellectual capacity, etc. And the biases of each of us differs. The thing is that most of us are unaware of these biases or preconceived notions. My perception of DEI is that it's an attempt to awaken our students to this, and part of the process is to determine how important of an issue it is in our community. My daughter is mixed race, and she struggled with comments from her schoolmates related to the type of food she ate, her eyes, her last name, etc. These comments were in some cases pretty trivial, and in others hurtful, but none of them were needed. Clearly, there's a problem in North Kingston. In fact, I'd be hard-pressed to believe that there's a community of humans that does not have a problem of this sort at some level. Again, we are wired this way, but that does not mean that it is necessary in every aspect of our lives. The point is that we need to identify specific problem areas and the magnitude of each of these problems. Let's not be afraid to learn that our community is typical in this regard, and there is something that we can do to improve it. The first step in doing so is to characterize the issues, hence the DEI community assessment. I trust that the school committee will make the right decision in this regard, and I fully support whatever you decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Katie Graybeer-Black.
My name is Katie Gabriel Black. I live at 140 Burnt Cedar Drive in North Kingstown. I'm here tonight in support of the equity audit as a member of the DEI subcommittee under the dedicated service of 2 school committee members. I spent significant time reading proposals, researching these consulting groups and their backgrounds, and looking for ways to ensure that we get the best value for our money. At our last DEI meeting, there was a motion to present the school committee with the full PCG proposal as is, without eliminating or reducing phases. And I voted against that motion and wanted to explain why. I don't believe we need every phase as is to meaningfully benefit from this audit. For instance, in Phase 5, PCG offers the option of conducting a detailed analysis of district data. The NK school district already collects a lot of this information, and so perhaps there is space in a phase like that to reduce cost. At a cost of just over $10,000, PCG proposes evaluating the curriculum to ensure that it is representative. Our curriculum already meets state standards, and we could reduce or cut this phase. So for example, as part of the Phase 1 surveys and interviews and focus groups, we could instead ask about what it's been like to implement this curriculum and to hear from those who have experienced it from a student end and from a parent end. To be very clear, I believe NK would benefit from an outside group evaluating our processes. Like many other districts, our district needs an outside perspective, helping us to recognize and address opportunity gaps with respect to gender, race, culture, socioeconomic status, politics, religion, ability, and their intersections, with the goal of serving every student. So I urge the school committee to support the audit, but with an eye to fiscal responsibility. Please consider ways to reduce the cost as you work to help students of all backgrounds achieve their full potential through this audit and other initiatives. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Next is Mary Green.
Good evening. My name is Mary Green. I come from a different area, South Kingstown, and I live at 1222 Saugatucket Road in Peacedale. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm president of the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, a statewide grassroots organization of Christians and Jews that supports Israel, Judeo-Christian values. Rhode Island Coalition of Israel supports the North Kingstown parents against indoctrination. Rhode Island Coalition of Israel has no problem with diversity, since we are a diverse nation. We have no problem with inclusion unless in practice you include only certain groups based on skin color, gender identity, or political or religious beliefs. We do have a problem with equity as opposed to equality. Equity, which means lowering standards so that we can say that everyone succeeds regardless of effort. This goes against the core beliefs of this nation. No matter how you may try to hide it, diversity, equity, inclusion brings with it critical race theory or race and gender-based teachings at the expense of academic skills. We see students and teachers being segregated by skin color as one outcome of DEI programs. Another is the damaging notion that people who don't agree with the DEI agenda are racist. Another is that white people are evil and privileged, and that notion leads to discrimination against Christians and Jews and anti-Zionism. Before you commit your school district to an expensive study that will substitute progressive indoctrination for academic learning, please think twice before you vote tonight on the recommendation being brought to you. You may have the legal and political authority to impose this program on the town, but you must also think about moral authority. All of us who have been entrusted with decision making must consider the moral impact of our decisions first. You must not succumb to political pressure. We must all strive for respect for all people and avoid divisiveness. As president of the Rhode Island Coalition for Israel, I implore you to turn away from a hasty decision tonight. Put this question before the voters of your town. Organize a referendum on whether this study should go forward to get voters...
I have to ask you to please wrap up.
Thank you. To get voters' true feelings before you act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is John Kingston.
John Kingston, 116 High Bank Avenue. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Interesting words. This school committee seems hell-bent on pushing this program. Why? The research as indicated by the Uniform Crime Report of FBI statistics indicates no racial complaints rising to the level of a civil rights violation for the past 5 years. One of your committee, like my time given back on that one, of a civil rights violation for the past 5 years. One of your committee members was quick to respond to these facts, stating that, quote, students feared retaliation for reporting problems. The problem with that statement is that the FBI statistics cover all of the population in NK in Jamestown, not just students. Are we to believe that if a student had a problem, that a responsible parent would not report it to either North Kingstown school officials or law enforcement agency? Or is this a tacit admission of failure on your part in the Thomas situation? Your lack of response to questions taking advantage to COVID mandates to close open meetings until now and failure to respond to citizens' written questions is telling. I have a better idea for a DEI audit than we can conduct and conclude right here tonight. Diversity. Following in the footsteps of the leader of your party, who appointed a black female as a primary qualifying asset for the Supreme Court post, I suggested 3 of your board members resign immediately. Appoint a black member, a Hispanic member, and an Oriental member. You have too many white people sitting up there. Show us you can be real leaders and make your committee give me a chance here. Pages get stuck. Make your committee diverse. Set an example. After all, a fish rots from the head. Equity. Take a look around you. Inflation has run amok. Gas and oil prices are almost double, along with some food items. People on fixed incomes and families with tight budgets are hurting. Yet you want to stick a $70,000 bill for an audit that is sure to be self-perpetuating and finding problems that don't exist, and further billing for additional services to correct non-existent problems. Where is the equity toward your constituents? Do you really need to spend the whole allowable increase of 4% of your budget with a surplus already there?
I gave you a little extra time, but I have to ask you to please wrap up.
And more funding yet to come. Inclusion. Your lack of interest in the concerns is one of the biggest problems most of your detractors have with you. You are not dictators. You are elected officials, in case you forgot.
Again, sir, I have to ask you to please wrap up.
Yeah, sure. Failing to include these concerns raised about pedocentric reading material, unconventional sex education practices, lack of transparency on the Thomas issue, addressing questions
Sir,
posed
you've
directly
exceeded
to
your
some
time.
school committee members on top
Sir,
school administration.
you've exceeded your
not
time.
inclusion, but the opposite. My assessment just saved you $70,000, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Next is Rick Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. It's good to be here this evening. My name is Rick Sellers. I live at 17 Johnson Avenue, North Kingstown. I've been listening to the dialogue here tonight, and I've looked at what you're trying to do with this audit, and I support it. I think that it's a way of gathering data and information that can provide a foundation upon which actions can be taken and possibly actions can be avoided if they're not necessary. So I encourage you, I would agree with one thing you said, exhibit your moral authority. Do this for our children. It's an investment in their future and in all our futures. And I thank you for your service. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Erin Earl.
Hi, Erin Earl, 170 Matola Drive. As a mom of children just starting their education in the district in pre-K and first grade, and a proud graduate of the North Kingstown School District who believes strongly in education reform and the need to improve equity in systems, I speak to you today to express my support for the North Kingstown School Committee to approve funding for an equity audit of the school system. I believe strongly that assessment of a system can highlight opportunities for improvement as well as reinforce areas of strength. I have had firsthand experience with an assessment similar to the one proposed through my job at the University of Rhode Island. Last year, we worked with a nationally renowned company called Rhode Associates to conduct a campus climate survey to hear from our faculty, staff, and students. Doing this audit allowed us to better understand policies, practices, and procedures that were creating unequal challenges for members of our population. It gave us an opportunity to listen to the members of our community in an organized and thoughtful way, as well as have a third party analyze our data and provide themes. I feel the benefits to the school district and the town will be to have a better understanding of the current environments of our schools. This will allow administrators and the school committee to access the data to inform more strategic decisions. Additionally, assessments like this can be extremely useful in providing data which can be used for grants and funding. I think it is a necessary tool to get a better understanding of the school district and to have impact on allowing our town to provide exemplary education. I encourage the school committee to approve the funding for the audit. Thank you for your service.
Thank you. Next is Karen Kuzminski. Person still here. I'm pretty sure it says Karen or something. It's definitely Kuzminski. Okay. Then next after that is Richard Welsh.
Thank you. I apologize for taking so long to get here. A couple of things.
Sir, if you could do the name and address.
Yeah. Richard Welch, 8 Arrow Lane, North Kingstown. Been in town over 40 years. 3 children raised in the community. Never had one of them ever talk to us as parents about any problem with diversity. In my short life on this earth, over 70 years now, one thing that I have seen, witnessed, if you will, is our society has been maturing, and we're more tolerant or more understanding of different people's backgrounds, etc. We now accept things that we never accepted before when I was a kid. Gays, marriage, etc. So I would say, you know, we're getting there, folks. But it just doesn't happen overnight. And you're not going to force it through education on our kids from people trying to take over the role of parents. I disagree with it. Don't support the DEI audit. I sent an email earlier this week asking for when the Phase 2 report from the attorney would be public. Never got a response. Can you tell me when it will be public?
Mr. Welsh, you've sat in my chair before. You know that the school committee doesn't respond to direct questions. We have an agenda item that will mention what we can mention.
Okay. The last thing I want to mention is this nonsense about gender-neutral restrooms that I keep on hearing about. I think that's folly. I think we're here for education. We're not here for having boys and girls go to the bathroom together. I don't know how are you handling the staff. Are they going to be in gender-neutral restrooms? I kind of doubt it. I also know that according to the plumbing code for the state of Rhode Island, you're going to be in a problem. If you change your restrooms to gender neutral, they won't count in what is required for the population in the school, because gender neutral doesn't count. You need to have male and female restrooms. So I don't know how you're going to get by that one. But if I had kids in this system, they definitely would not be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Izzy Montini.
All right. Hello and good evening, school committee members. I'm here to speak in favor for the equity audit to evaluate. Oh wait, sorry.
Thank you.
I always forget that. Izzy Montini, 70 Bethany Lane, North Kingstown. Hello and good evening, school committee members. I'm here to speak in favor for the equity audit to evaluate district-wide programs. Before I begin, I would like to point out a few things that were said this evening that I do not believe to be true. One is that an equity audit is political. I'm unsure on how it could be disagreeable to take a look at what we can do to improve our schools. It's not political to try to make education better for students in comparison to their respective backgrounds, whether that be race, gender, ethnicity, or income. We need to look at inequities and see how this affects the learning environment. You say you care about reading, writing, and arithmetic, but some students, due to their circumstances, may not be able to exceed in these areas. This is why an equity audit is necessary. 2, this is not going to cost millions of dollars. All this equity audit does is make recommendations. Then those recommendations will be voted on before spending more money, and we can cross that bridge when we get there. With this equity audit, we will be able to see from an independent company where we need improvements. I would also like to point out that this would cost less than 2% of the money in the ESSER funds. Less than 2% of the ESSER funds to improve the quality of our schools for all students. Just remember that there are many people who may not agree all the time, but are willing to work in good faith to find common ground and compromise. Anyone who is unwilling to back up their hateful comments with productive meetings are cowards, and I hope you listen to those who express their views in good faith, no matter if they agree or disagree with your policies or proposals. Thank you. I hope you vote to support this audit.
Thank you. Next is Lori Duffy.
Hi, Lori Duffy, 88 Haverhill Ave in North Kingstown. I'm a clinical social worker who specializes in kids and families. I'm here to support the equity audit. And just as a reminder, the equity audit is not just about race, and we need to be careful of the propaganda that's flying through social media that's using these fear-mongering techniques to scare parents into thinking that their children are at risk just from the school doing an assessment. Let's just show that North Kingstown has nothing to hide, and that will continue to strive to be an amazing school district and an amazing community. I wouldn't buy a house without knowing what's working and what needs to be updated. And if I buy that house, that doesn't mean immediately I need to make all of those changes. An audit is not tying us to making those changes, but it gives us valuable information about what's working and what could be improved. School has never been just about reading, writing, and arithmetic, and I'm so tired of hearing that over and over again. Schools are made up of amazing teachers that can make us feel incredible or make us feel like we have crumbled. Who was that teacher for you? Think back to when you were in school and you were a young person. What was that teacher that made you feel heard and seen and inspired you and told you that you could do amazing things, who excited you about school and learning? That was way more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic. Great teachers live their profession far beyond their 180 days of teaching. Teachers have always been more than educators, and they always will be. We need to give them support to make sure that all kids have access to a great education. I recently started reading Teacher Man by Frank McCourt. You might know him better for Angela's Ashes, and he wrote this wonderful memoir about being a teacher in New York City, bless his soul, for 40 years. And he wrote, "I was more than a teacher. In the classroom, you are a drill sergeant, a rabbi, a shoulder to cry on, a disciplinarian, a singer, a low-level scholar, a clerk, a referee, a clown, a counselor, a dress code enforcer, a conductor, a philosopher, collaborator, tap dancer, politician, therapist, a fool, a traffic cop, a priest, a mother, father, brother, sister, uncle, a bookkeeper, a critic, a psychologist, the last straw." Let's make sure that all of our kids get equal access to our amazing teachers, and that staff get access to support and information that they need to make sure that we can continue to meet all of those needs. I support the audit. We are talking about just over 1% of ESSER funds. And if you do not approve this tonight, you might never get this opportunity again in the coming years. Equity audits have been going on for over 20 years. This is not a rush. And you can't deny that our school system has problems when all year long I've been watching parents and former students come down to this mic to talk about things that they experience. They have been pouring their hearts out to you and making themselves incredibly vulnerable. Do not deny them what they need and what our kids need. Support the audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jen LeCompte.
Jennifer LeCompte, 17 West Main. I have 4 children who have been through...
Could you just say the town? Sorry, I know it, but...
I'm sorry.
The town.
North Kingstown.
Thank you.
I have 4 children who have been through North Kingstown schools. 2 are currently still there. You've had a number of well-spoken citizens supporting the audit this evening. I'd like to add my wish that you'll move forward with it. You on the school board have dealt with tremendous adversity over the course of your term. You've stuck through because you believe in what you're doing. I believe in what you're doing. You've kept the best interests of our community at the front of your decisions. And as an organization aimed at learning, I applaud your desire to gather data to continue to learn and grow. Our community, our entire community, deserves this audit. My white, male, straight, cis sons are going to benefit from this because as a rising tide lifts all boats, a stronger community benefits us all. So stay the course, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last person, I just have an initial, so when you speak, if you could please state your full name. It's D. Zarhorn, something like that. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dominic Zachorn. I'm a resident here of Wickford since the early 70s.
I do need to state your full address.
160 Pleasant Street.
Thank you.
I believe it's been adequately stated by mothers and grandmothers here this evening. The audit is an appropriate means to analyze different cultural differences going on. My own experience with young people from 5th grade to college level, I would just say that this program would help out many people understanding how to work with the people, work with the students. I think you guys should go ahead and do this.
Thank you, sir. Okay, that's the last person who signed up for citizens' comments. So moving on with the agenda, we have... I need a motion to seal the executive session minutes of March 8th, 2022. A motion from Ms. Lima.
Second.
A second from Ms. Hildebrand. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And I can disclose that no votes were taken in this evening's executive session. So next we have the consent agenda. Do any members have anything that they would like to exempt from the consent agenda? No? Okay. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
A motion from Ms. Hildebrand. Second from Mr. Mather. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Next we have 2021-22 school budget.
No.
Okay. 2022-23 school budget.
No.
Okay. We have an item under CIP, existing bond and future bond. Mrs. King.
Right, so there are 2 items under this topic. So as you know, when we work with Rhode and we go through the steps in the approval process for projects, Rhode will suggest other services that we need to seek. So Rhode wants us to be sure that we have an owner's project manager on this contract, even though the numbers are pretty close for those requirements. And then, of course, we do need a commissioning agent because it's ventilation work. So those projects were both bid out, and I put in front of you the recommendation for each of those awards.
Did any members have any questions on those bids? Okay, if not, I'd ask, Ms. Lima stepped out for a second, so I don't want to put her on the spot, but you know what, I'm going to take like a 1.5-minute recess here, okay? I'll give her a moment. If we could take a, we'll say 2-minute recess. A motion, I'm going to make that motion. A second from Mr. Mather. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so we're going to recess for like 2 minutes here. We didn't need 2 minutes. Sorry, Jen. Didn't mean to put you on the spot. Okay. And we're back. Okay. Didn't want you to miss the vote there. Okay. I need a motion to approve item C1. I have a motion from Mr. Mather.
Second.
Second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And I need a motion for item C2. Motion from Mr. Mather.
Second.
Second from Ms. Hildebrand. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Attorney Carroll, item D, status of the investigation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We continue to work with Matt Oliverio, who is at the point where he's concluding his interviews and will be providing his report, I think, by sometime next week. As soon as I know when it'll be available, I will certainly let the committee know, but it is coming to closure. We're also working with Judge McGurl. She intends to be in the district at least one more day to finish up some of her interviews, but we are certainly cooperating with her and setting up interviews for Judge McGurl. And we are continuing to work with the Department of Justice. They have sent out for more information, which we are working on providing, and they will actually be doing a site visit in the district sometime in April. So that's the status of the investigation as I know it today.
Thank you. So we had the policy subcommittee had a meeting a little while back and has proposed a number of policies. So we'll take them one at a time. So the first is item E1, which is policy ILBA, District's Program School Improvement Process. One just sort of housekeeping thing I'll mention for members of the public. When we're amending a policy, we will do it in a single meeting. When we're approving a new policy, which is, for example, item 5, we do 2 readings of it before we do that. So a vote in favor of items 1 through 4 would be a final vote. The final one, number 5, we'll vote on it our next meeting as well, presumably. So if I could ask a motion to approve item E1.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Hildebrand. Second from Ms. Lima. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that policy? Okay, if not, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Item E2, I'm going to make a motion to table item E2.
I just had a question before we go through them all. Can
Yep.
you explain how the subcommittee picks the policies that are going to be required?
I'm not on that subcommittee, so Attorney Carroll, you work closely with the policy subcommittee. Okay, sorry, your mic wasn't on.
I'm just wondering if somebody could explain which policy, like how the policies are chosen to come up for review.
Okay, so the policies that we have tonight were policies that we either had to amend because of changes in law and requirements or things that we were working on for quite some time. So, for example, we had to do 5 because that's a new law. We had to update 1 because that's a new law. And then we found some errors in some of the other policies. What we're doing is we actually have a spreadsheet where that actually Mrs. King has provided. And what we're doing is we're going through the policies, looking at the oldest ones, bringing them to policy subcommittee, and starting at that point to revise policies. So that's what we're doing right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So I'm making a motion to table item E2. Just in my review, I noticed a couple typos and just some things that I think that need to get cleaned up. So we'll work on that and bring it forward. It's nothing super substantive. So I'm making that motion to table item E2. If I could have a second. Second from Mr. Mather. All those in favor of tabling this for now? Aye. Any opposed? So that is tabled. We'll start with a motion. I need a motion to approve item E3.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Hildebrand, second from Ms. Lima. I just want to make a point on this one. Obviously, the Access to Public Records Act is something that people have a lot of interest in. The only purpose to this policy is that in my own review of the policy, I happened to notice that the General Assembly had added 1 or 2 additional categories to a list, and our policy just hadn't been updated to reflect the change in the statute, so that's the only thing that's changing there. It's really just ministerial. So if I could get a motion to approve item E3. A motion, Mr. Mather. Second from Ms. Lima. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. If I could have a motion to approve item E4. Yep, motion from Ms. Lima. Second from Mr. Mather. Ms. Lima, you had a question?
Yeah, so I noticed going through it, some of the changes that have been made. One of them was removing the mention of enforcing the chemical health policy. I'm just wondering what the reason was for that.
Can someone speak to that?
I believe that that's because that is in the employee handbook. So all school committee policies are referenced in the employee handbook that we produce from HR, and employees of the district are required to follow all school committee policies.
Okay.
And if you look further on, the policy itself lists the responsibilities and duties of coaches that's within that. Okay. So it's sort of sucked in another way, so to speak. Any other questions? Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And this would be just a first read. And again, as Attorney Carroll mentioned, it's due to a new state law. I need a motion to approve item E5. That is a motion, Mr. Mather. Second from Ms. Lima. And just a note from the public, and Mrs. King, correct me if I'm wrong, it is now amazingly legal to bring sunscreen to school. Before the law change, it was arguably had to be kept in a locked cabinet with the nurse. So we've moved into a slightly more reasonable way of dealing with that with this policy.
Before we move on, Greg, can I just...
yes.
Since this is just a first read, the parent-guardian form portion of it, the second checkbox in that is very unclear. I think it's just, it says, by checking this box, you confirm that the student, that you understand that the school is not responsible for ensuring. It's just it's funny wording that just needs to get worked out. I can send that.
So we'll take another pass at that and fix that in the second read. Thank you.
Other than that, it's...
Actually, both of those are worded kind of weirdly. We may have to look at both of those.
We'll set it up for the next week.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. But for that, we can do it this time and do a final vote next time. So we had a motion and a second, I believe. Yes. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Next we have item 5, which is the school committee approval of the DEI community assessment. Mrs. Lima, this is really your subcommittee, and I know you've led the charge on this, so I think it would be best if I could have you take the mic and give an overview of what the proposal is so that we can have more information.
Sure. I'd like to thank everybody who spoke tonight, regardless of your opinions on it. I think it's important that this be discussed. The North Kingstown School Department mission is to educate our students to become intellectually active adults, to inspire them to reach individual excellence, and to challenge them to become responsible members of society. But excellence without equity is not excellence. It's hypocrisy. Recognizing that, the school committee voted in March to approve the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Special Subcommittee to ensure that students have equitable access to educational opportunities that help them achieve their full potential while supporting and harnessing their individuality, as well as the history and backgrounds of their families and the entire North Kingstown community. After discussing various ways to go about achieving this charge, as well as meeting school committee goals, the subcommittee decided an equity audit conducted by an outside party was the best way to proceed. In October of 2021, the school department issued an RFP for a DEI community assessment, otherwise known as an equity audit. Before I talk about what an equity audit is, I want to talk about what an equity audit is not. It is not a predetermined outcome. It is not a pretense to dismantle and replace the school's curriculum and culture. It is not a money laundering scam designed to advance a political agenda, and equity does not destroy equality. Equality means each individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. It's the difference between providing every child with a winter jacket versus providing every child with a winter jacket that fits. An equity audit is the study of the fairness of an institution's policies, programs, and practices. They are conducted in a variety of arenas, including, but not limited to, education. For example, corporations and governmental entities commonly conduct or are subject to employment equity audits, health equity audits, pay equity audits, gender equity audits, and technology equity audits, among others. Studies have shown that many educators continue to underestimate the degree to which achievement and opportunity gaps are present in their schools and districts, and often avoid discussing the structural causes of inequity, instead attributing achievement gaps to students' home life or their genetics. Administrators and teachers overwhelmingly do not have a clear, accurate, or useful understanding of the degree of inequity present in their own schools and school districts. Data is powerful. It separates personal agendas from organizational necessities. When data is collected, analyzed, and exhibited in a transparent way, it's difficult for teachers, parents, and even school board members to deny certain disparities in practices, deficiencies in systems, and gaps in outcomes. An equity audit allows one to collect data related to the many possible inequities within a school and/or classroom in terms of race, class, gender, disability, sexual identity, language, and so on. The conductor of an equity audit examines disaggregated data across several areas. The educator then selects one area to further examine, determines whether a pattern of inequity is occurring, analyzes the potential causes, collaboratively works to devise a solution, implements the identity, language, and so on. An equity audit benefits all students. The DEI subcommittee is recommending that the school department contract with Public Consulting Group to conduct a full-scale DEI community assessment that will examine all aspects of the educational process, including board policy, district programming, curriculum and instruction, human resources practices, budget allocations, and North Kingstown School Department's culture and climate. Public Consulting Group is excited to partner with North Kingstown School Department to accomplish our goal of employing strategies to identify and address the causes of inequity as part of an overall community assessment. The DEI subcommittee recommends accepting PCG's proposal as written. PCG was selected as the vendor for multiple reasons. Their evaluation services use qualitative and quantitative methodologies to help determine the progress of specific student populations, assess the impact of certain programs, and engage in informed, data-driven decision-making to foster improvement. They believe that understanding the root causes behind inequities in education system requires not only a review of written policies and data, but also includes engaging a variety of stakeholders in the process. They believe that student voice should be at the table for these conversations and that their voice is key. During their interview with us, they stressed that they are going to come in from a research background as an external party to take an objective look and have conversations that are grounded in data. It was stressed that having these conversations with someone that is not embedded in the district and coming in to do this work separately helps a lot. There is no agenda that can be pointed to and no personal history that can be pointed to. That being said, they reminded us that this work is hard. These conversations are personal, and these conversations can be difficult to have. But it's what they do, and they believe it's absolutely essential to make sure our district is serving every single child as much as it can. They also noted that across the country, COVID has perpetuated existing inequities, including the digital divide, access to food, etc. They understand the importance of reaching out in non-traditional ways in order to bridge what gaps may exist or have gotten wider. Under the ESSER guidelines, money can be used as follows: allocating resources in ways that advance equity, and ensuring those resources are adequate for providing the opportunities and supports that students need to succeed. This is particularly important as we recover from the disproportionate impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on communities of color and communities experiencing poverty. By addressing the many dimensions of resource equity, including equitable and adequate school funding, access to a well-rounded education, well-prepared, effective, and diverse educators and staff, and integrated support services, we can begin to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on schools and students and can close long-standing gaps in educational opportunity. The audit as proposed would cost $73,250 and would be paid for using ESSER funds if approved. A couple people have noted tonight, and I want to confirm that that amount is approximately 1.2% of all the ESSER funds that our district has been allocated. Concerns have been raised about additional costs resulting from the recommendations to implement post-audit. I have reviewed sample assessments from other districts, and I've actually spoken to personnel who've worked with PCG, and many improvements require resource allocation only. In one district, of the approximately 53 recommendations that were made, 45 of them are essentially free. For example, examining current policies and practices from an equity lens. When, how, and even if we decide to act on any of the audit's findings can all be discussed at a later date. But not looking at something because we may have to fix it is not a solution. If I ignore the leak in my ceiling, it's not going to go away. I know that not everyone in this town believes that we should proceed with this audit or even that it's needed. I honestly would like nothing better than to have the results come back indicating that there are no problems. However, a quick review of data available from the Rhode website reveals that there are inequities present within our district that show up in race and gender categories. In addition, while North Kingstown may not be a diverse community, many of our students are going to be competing in college and in the workforce outside of North Kingstown. Being able to operate in different cultural circles is an important skill, even for white people. It's a disadvantage not to prepare our students for the reality of a global society. Numerous schools and districts have made significant improvements in all areas of inequities through the use of these types of audits. It's not a question of whether it can be done, but whether we have the will, the commitment to do it. North Kingstown School Department's vision for our students states that we will provide a learning environment that meets the diverse needs of every student. In it, we say that we commit to using our resources to support our priorities: student learning and achievement, effective and innovative instruction, and continuous professional improvement. Proceeding with this audit supports that vision and affirms our commitment within this district to equity and inclusion.
Thank you, Mrs. Lima. So I'll leave it up to any school committee members who have any questions or comments. And we would need a motion, actually, so we should start with a motion. Okay, Ms. Lima has made a motion to approve item 5. Do we have a second?
A second.
A second from Ms. Hildebrand. Okay. So now we have a motion and a second. Discussion. Anyone have any comments or anything they'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd like
Mr.
to add
Mather.
a couple of things. So I'm also on the DEI subcommittee, and I shared a couple of points at the last meeting about the survey, or about the proposals, rather. And although I completely agree, and this is in no way, I do support the equity audit, and I agree with the intent of the equity audit entirely. Or maybe the entirely word is not appropriate. And I do understand that we don't know what we don't know, and that's the point of us doing this. But I do think that there are some elements of the proposals that we may know. And we had a fairly lengthy hour-long discussion about that at the last DEI meeting. And I would like to propose that we go back to these vendors, both of them, and ask them to amend their proposals to maybe pick out a few of the things that we think that we do know. We did address that, and we have had tremendous support for this from all over the community. We've also had a tremendous amount of not support. There's probably a better word than not support. And the vast majority of the people that didn't support this didn't support it on a budget, for budgetary reasons. It's a lot of money. It's not a small amount of money to spend. And if we can trim $10,000 or $20,000 by pulling out some of the elements that we discussed in the DEI meeting 2 weeks ago, I think that would be a good step in the right direction. Again, I do support the audit. I support the survey. I support what we hopefully eventually will hire them to do, but I think there are a few things that we do know.
Yeah, and like you said, we talked about it at the subcommittee meeting, and the two areas that we honed in on were the curriculum and the data.
Yes.
And I think, I don't think anybody would disagree with you there, and I just want to confirm that the reason why the full committee voted to advance this was because of not knowing what we don't know. And
Exactly.
It would be, if we just assume that we're good in that area, we're assuming instead of finding out. So,
yeah. I personally just think it's worth continuing the conversation just a little bit longer to get a few more answers, because, I mean, we are using ESSER funds and they do expire. The ESSER 2 funds don't expire until September of 23, and ESSER 3 funds, which we could conceivably use as well, don't expire until 2024. So there is time to do this and to get the answers, and ultimately if we get the answers, if we get the proposals and decide to still go through with the full, we can still do that. I just think not asking the questions, not gathering the information at this point is not doing us justice.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I just, the DEI subcommittee was charged with bringing a recommendation forth. The school committee has the authority to approve, reject, or amend. And so I think we have completed the DEI charge by bringing it to the table, and then what happens to it from here is up to us.
I think Jake's asking to amend it.
Yeah, no, and that's, I would, can you specify like what your...
It sounds to me like Jake is asking it to go back to the DEI subcommittee to amend it.
Right.
I am. I'm asking it to, I don't know if tabling it for tonight and bringing it back to the DEI subcommittee to get more information from our vendors. Is that a thing?
Well, the only thing that I'd note, and Mrs. King, I might call, I know this isn't necessarily a bid that you fully oversaw, but with the bidding process, we put an item out to bid, the bids are in. We can't just ask them to
change. Both vendors have to be
right. It would essentially be rebid if that's what you're talking
bids
about.
Indicated that that the pieces could be broken up, they could be taken out. Like it's not a complete, like they broke it out into phases, and they said the phases can be done independently, separately, not at all. So
if that's the case, it still needs to be rebid.
And during the interview process,
I want to let Mrs. King to chime in a little.
No, I don't think you need to fully rebid, but whatever you ask one vendor to do, you must give the other vendor the opportunity to do the same. So if you were asking a vendor to take out one or two pieces, you need to ask them both to do that and come back to you with revised pricing.
Okay.
Yeah. And, if you had 10 vendors, that's what you would need to do. This is a public bidding process, so anything that you're asking of one, you need to give the other one the opportunity, a fair opportunity to provide you with the same information.
So if that's what folks would want to do, we'd need the simplest way to do that would be to withdraw the motion by unanimous consent and then put forth another motion. So is that what the consensus of the committee is, that you want to withdraw the motion to approve and then so anyone object to withdrawing the motion to approve? So no one's objecting. So we have unanimous consent to withdraw the motion. So we now need a new motion. So are you, I don't want to speak for you, so I'm not sure where you're going.
I'm not quite sure how to do it. I'd like to have a motion to bring this back to the DEI subcommittee and request additional information from both vendors.
In terms of...
What you want to do is you want to table tonight
and refer it back to the subcommittee.
For the purpose of sending it back
Yep.
to the subcommittee.
That's exactly what I want to do.
So, could I also make a suggestion?
Certainly.
One of the things that I noticed in both proposals is that the timeline is definitely off because they both started in January.
Yep.
So I also would love the DEI subcommittee to have a conversation about that and when this proposal would be able to start. It seems to me as though we're already halfway through the middle of March, that it doesn't seem like it's something that could happen this school year, and to see how that might impact things, how things might get adjusted, and that also probably impacts the way a proposal is presented by these agencies. We don't know what their schedule is. Right. We don't know when they would be able to start, or if they would even still be in the running for something like this if we adjust the timeline.
Yep, that's reasonable.
Okay, so Mr. Mather, if I understood it, you made a motion that we table this item and refer it back to the DEI subcommittee for another look at basically going back to the vendors to clarify the bids and what options could be removed. So if I'm understanding you want the DEI subcommittee to say, Okay, tell us what it'll cost without these things, and then it would go back to the vendors, right?
That is exactly
okay,
the case.
So let me try to make
both
that...
vendors were very agreeable to doing that during the interview process.
Let me make that more succinct. So we'll call it I'll make the motion just for simplicity. The motion would be to table this item, refer it to the DEI subcommittee to look at what items could be removed from the bids and then sent back to the vendors for clarification. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Mather, I think, raised his hand a fraction of a second beforehand. Just with respect to discussion on that, I'm going to be really upfront and frank. I have said, and I continue to say, that I fully support the work of the DEI subcommittee. I support the forming of the DEI subcommittee and the work that you're doing. I've been very disappointed by a lot of commentary, misinformation, obfuscation, a lot of words I could choose for what some of the opponents have put out there in the public. I can also say that I've heard a lot of concerns from people who are opposed to the DEI survey, and I think a lot of them have merit as well. So I'm a little bit of a hard sell on this. I'm very concerned about the cost, the scope, and to the extent that the district has the ability to do some of these things ourselves. But just like I said when I voted to approve the bid itself, I have no problem with getting more information. So I'm willing to keep an open mind, vote for this motion to send it back, just with the understanding that, when I see these new proposals, I'm going to be looking at them with the same things in mind, and it may or may not have my support at that point. So that's where I stand. The commentary that, the classic line I hear all the time is, we're not a racist town, we don't need to do anything. I'm sorry, I just can't agree with a statement like that. There's far more to this than race, and it's just not, it's not that simple. There is clearly work to be done, and we can do better. I'm just not certain this is the best way we can do that, and it's the best way to spend this kind of funds. But we'll see when it comes back.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, Mrs. King.
So, kind of along your lines, Mr. Chairman, would this kind of audit, and I'm sorry that I don't know the answer to this, maybe this is a stupid question, but would this kind of audit also point to any issues that we have or that are identified as discrimination against women in the North Kingstown School Department?
It's my understanding that they would. They're looking for any type of inequity. So any type of discrimination, any type of disparate treatment, any type of anything that is affecting, the education. And I think that definitely falls into that category.
Yeah, I think that it does. I think that it would be very important that our young females understand when they are being discriminated against. I believe that there have been a lot of instances of that in North Kingstown. I know there have been against myself, but I would be more concerned with our younger females that, are not 56 years old and haven't put up with it for 56 years or 40-some years working in any kind of industry at all. So I do think that that's important. I just wasn't sure if that would be part of this kind of audit.
No, and I'm glad that you asked that question because I can't stress this enough. This is not just about race, and Chair Blasco just alluded to that. It's about any type of inequity, any type of unfair treatment, anything that's affecting the students in this district. So,
okay. Thank you. So, right. So we have a motion on the table, which with a second. So, all those in favor to table and refer it back to the subcommittee? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. So next we have the school committee approval of the RISS survey. That's item 6. Can I get a motion to approve? Motion from Ms. Lima. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Mather. I want to thank you both for the presentation. Any members have any questions that weren't addressed during the presentation?
I don't have any. Oh, sorry.
I don't have any questions. I just, obviously.
I don't think that mic's on, so if you hear
the data from 2020 obviously isn't much data, so it'd be interesting to compare it to 2018, but then also pull out individual schools like both middle schools to high school, different grades,
right,
and really use some of that information comparatively to 2018. And just 2020 was a wash.
Mm-hmm. And that's a valid point. There's been a lot of commentary, criticism about all kinds of things, and often the answer is we have not been dealing with the most normal 2 years, folks. One of the metrics that we rely on throughout the school district are free and reduced student lunch numbers. Right now, every kid gets a free lunch. There are no free and reduced student lunch numbers. We have no numbers to work with. Looking at a survey like we just did, the numbers don't work. Our budget doesn't work. Nothing works. Everything's different. Everything's weird. So as we, have our first meeting here in person without masks on, I'm looking at this as a corner that we're turning, and hopefully, we don't go backwards in any other way. But it's going to be so useful to have actually useful metrics and data, because we have nothing makes sense. Every number has an asterisk next to it. By the way, and they will forever. Looking back, that's going to say, by the way, don't look at that number. It's a COVID year. It doesn't make sense. So I agree.
I'd like to follow up. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was helpful, and I do agree that the numbers they're really difficult to compare, and part of it's the fact that we just don't have enough. So I think getting more information is really important. Another point that I was thinking about as a father of a middle schooler, not quite 8th grader yet, is what an amazing opportunity for parents to have these conversations with their students at home, because they're going to get this notification and they're going to see this survey and they're going to be able to start that conversation, because sometimes just starting the conversation is the very hardest thing. So I think if for no other reason, and there are 1,000 other reasons, providing an opportunity to have a conversation between mom and dad and your 8th grader or your senior is incredibly valuable.
Thank you, Mr. Mather. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you again. So next, I lost my spot. Yep, okay. School calendar. We got so much to talk about. Oh, I skipped technology. All right, back. Technology, then calendar. You said calendar. You said me wrong. Okay. So I need a motion to approve to start the conversation item 5, 6, 7, the 5-year technology plan. Do I have a motion?
Oh, so moved.
A motion from Ms. Hildebrand. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Mather. With respect to discussion, one thing I just want to point out, I want to thank Mr. Waterman for his presentation, and I just want to make it clear that I'm going to vote in favor. I want to thank you for all the work that you've done, but what I want to make clear is that it is not a commitment from me, and you said it, but I'm going to reiterate it, that it is not, while it is a plan, it is not a commitment, a vote, or an approval for the individual expenditures and items that are contained within that plan. And in particular, there are a couple that concern me. Just as we talk about budgeting, there's a proposal to add, a staff member. Anytime there's an addition of an employee, you'll hear me talk about looking at priorities. It's a long-term commitment. It's one thing to spend money on Chromebooks and then you don't spend it again for, unfortunately, it's not 1 or 2 years, they go fast, but you're not spending it the following year. With an employee, you are committing to that money every single year. So I have concerns about the budgeting feasibility of the plan, but I feel that the plan itself is generally sound, so it has my support. But any other comments or questions? Your mic's not on.
I would agree with you. I had specific concerns about that additional educator also, if we're going to add staff. I'm not saying that it's not needed. I think he did a great job, but I think there might be staff in other areas that might be more critical. So.
Okay. And I love the idea of getting the students back involved. That has a lot to do with COVID and just, as you mentioned, enrollment. But for students in the CTE program and students looking to enter a technical field at any level, there is no substitute for handling a help desk, whether it's, for students or staff.
The one other thing I also want to commend him on is the hotspots for the students, because it's recognizing that there are students within this district that are homeless, and not everybody is cognizant of that, and I think it's important to recognize that Cox Wi-Fi doesn't work for everybody.
That's right. And again, just with respect to the hard work you've done, we began implementing this technology plan and did a Chromebook rollout. That is the only reason we were able to get through the complete closure during COVID time was the fact that every kid had a one-to-one device that we were able to go with. We didn't know that was why it was going to happen or what it was going to do, but if we had not done that, I don't know how distance learning could have possibly worked, because at that point, every single school district in the country was trying to buy a Chromebook, and if you didn't have them already, you were not getting them. And I know Mr. Waterman's nodding in the background because that's the way it was. So, all right, but we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, so now we are at the calendar. Okay. Dr. Shea, do you want to speak? Because you sent out the survey. You can go over some of those results.
No one came to the microphone tonight to talk about the calendar. I mean, come on, this is the focus of this meeting. We actually had a survey. I want to report out on that. We asked overall, preference of 2 days for a February break, meaning President's Day and an extra day on Tuesday, or have a full week. That was close, but 53% overall prefer the 2-day option. On the starting a week before Labor Day or the day after Labor Day, 60% preferred starting after Labor Day. I know a lot of people wrote in with concerns about the April break being consistent with other districts, and we definitely are. There are a couple of districts in the state that are doing it the following week, but in a poll that I was a part of with the Superintendent's Association, I think about 22 districts registered into that informal poll, and 20 out of the 22 were going with this particular week, which is the week that we have and the week that Rhode recommended. So this gets us to, if there are no snow days, an ending day of June 19th, which is a school day. It is an observation day for Juneteenth, but it is not a day off from school. So that's how we got to this particular calendar that you have in front of you. I want to commend the multiple staff in the central office, and Mike Waterman as well, halfway across the district, for helping me to get to, through multiple drafts of this item. It's something that you move one little piece and a whole bunch of other things start to fall apart. So it demands a lot of eyes on it, and I think we have it right here in all facets. But if there's a correction of any kind, we'll certainly let the community know.
So we need a motion to approve item 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion from Mr. Mather. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second from Ms. Lima. Any discussion? Yep, Ms. Lima.
The first thing, again, like Dr. O'Shea said, I know this is like multiple pieces and moving back and forth, and it's like that little game in the square where you have to, but anyways, there were a couple of things. I know we all got feedback from a lot of the community members, and I just wanted to, maybe not so much for this year, but things to look forward for next year. I know in the breakout that it seems like the majority of people wanted the shortened February break, but there's really a big difference if you take out the staff versus the parents. And I got a lot of emails from people saying that February vacation, a full vacation, is needed. So again, also like the April vacation, making sure that it's in the third week and not with the other thing. And the biggest message that I got from all of those communications is that statewide consistency amongst vacations, whether it be the full week or the partial days or whatever, I think is huge, because you have teachers in one district, students in another. And the other thing that somebody threw in was, what about a March break instead? So I think maybe for next year, we should look at how we can be consistent. And the idea of a spring break in March was actually, somebody raised, there's no conflict with sports, there's no conflict with the musical. People could actually have a vacation versus, having to miss things. The other thing, and I know we've talked about the calendar in the DEI subcommittee, is the lack of observance for religious holidays that are not Christian. I know we're an overwhelmingly Christian community, but that doesn't mean that, especially the Jewish community, I know we recognize the holidays on paper, but we don't actually observe them, and there's a big difference. And that was the other thing I just wanted to bring up. And then lastly, there was a recommendation from the DEI subcommittee to change Columbus Day to Indigenous People Day. So I would like to amend the motion to accept that as presented and make that change.
So you're making a motion to make that change?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have a second? I have a second from Mr. Mather. Okay. I'll state my piece on that. There's no way for me to to certain people to sound like a jerk here, so I'm simply going to be the legal guy that I tend to be, being the lawyer on the stage. The state of Rhode Island observes that holiday by a statute. The name of that holiday is Columbus Day by state law.
There are other districts that have changed it.
That's fine. So my position would be, and I have no problem with the General Assembly changing the name of the holiday, but when we have a day off, it's because it is a state holiday, and the name of that state holiday is Columbus Day. I mean, that is my take on it. And for that reason and that reason alone, if the statute changed, that's fine. If I was speaking at the General Assembly, I may even support the changing of the name. But as it stands now, we're observing Columbus Day. There's a story that I would look up before I was sure it's true, but there's a story that the General Assembly spent a great deal of time debating whether they should change the name of Victory over Japan Day, only to determine that it actually has never been called Victory over Japan Day. It's simply Victory Day, and then they realized they didn't need to change anything at all. So sometimes what we call things and what the holidays technically really aren't the same. So that's my piece on that. So we have a motion and a second on an amendment, just to remind everyone, Robert's rules wise. If you vote yes on this motion, there's a motion above it. So you're saying, yes, I want to change the motion, and then we vote on the motion again. If this motion fails, the motion would stay the same, and we would vote on that. Did everyone follow that? So one more time, we'll call a vote. If you vote yes, you're saying you want to vote again, but to say we're accepting the calendar with the change to be Indigenous Peoples' Day instead of Columbus Day, and then we still vote on that. Okay? So all those...
Can I ask just a clarification? So we're not changing the actual day. You're
the name on the calendar.
Here on this piece of paper.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So all those in favor on the motion to amend? 2 yeses. That's Ms. Lima and Mr. Mather. All those opposed? 3 noes. So that motion fails. The amendment fails. 3-2. Now we go back to the motion, which is to accept the calendar as proposed by the superintendent. I have a couple comments unless anyone else wants to speak. Okay. Basically what I want to say is, and we've sort of said this a bit, but calendars are impossible. Every single calendar is broken. No matter which calendar we pick, there's something wrong with it. When we schedule vacations, and we get emails every year, and I have a tremendous amount of sympathy for educators who have students in North Kingstown but work in another district, and we will get an email that says, if you just moved February break by 1 week, then you will line up with my district, and I don't have childcare issues, and I'm off the same time as my kids. But if we do that, I'm going to get an email from 3 teachers in another district because now we moved it to be out of sync with someone else. We're generally in sync with these communities that surround us. South County in particular tends to be, because we're South County, or Washington County when you want to talk about what things are really called, tend to be in sync with the beach communities, which is why when you look at this survey, people tend to want to start a little later after the Labor Day. They have beach rentals, things like that. When you go north, that tends to be less of a case. There's probably only one thing that I wish the Rhode Island Department of Education would just tell us what to do, and that would be a statewide calendar. We had it for that COVID year. I think it worked. It aligned with everybody. It solved all these problems, but it didn't stick. I thought that was the time that it might actually happen, but it didn't. So we've done a bit. There are flaws to it. It never works for everyone, but we got to have a calendar. So, all right. Then all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Next, school committee calendar. I apologize. I was looking at this and noticed something that we'd missed, and I've looked at it many times. So,
that's okay. We can table it if you want.
I think we're going to need to, but let me tell you what it is. 2022 is an election year. We have a biennial organizational meeting that we have to have that's set by charter, which is when the newly elected school committee members would be sworn in and the chair position comes up again. That wasn't on there, so we need to double check when that is. It'd be in December. I think it's the first Monday in December or something.
Okay. Yeah, no, I thought I had that on there, but
Unless
I'll definitely
we'll
look
double
at
check,
that
but I
as a
didn't
TBD.
see.
As a date.
You have the budget meeting as a 2BD.
Yo, you're right. Well, yeah,
They're
you're
not
right.
the same.
You're right. You're right. We have made them the same. Oh, no, we haven't. You're right.
Yeah, it's a different, because, right, one is when we sit with the town council to talk about the budget. The other is the town council and the school committee both get sworn in on that day.
You're right.
So a motion to table.
Was there something else?
That was all I said.
That was it? Okay.
So I made the motion, Mr. Mather second. All those in favor of tabling, aye.
I do just want to mention that if you can take another look at the dates, because the proposal is to move the school committee meeting dates to the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays from 2nd and 4th, okay?
Yep.
So that is important to know.
Thank you. Okay, and next is the school committee approval of the National Grid Summer Squad grant for the Office of Family Learning. Who's the best to speak just a little about that?
I quickly, we've gotten this grant from National Grid before. Office of Family Learning administers it. We would like to, Dr. Inoche and I would like to thank Tina Morris. She is our new overseer of Office of Family Learning, and she worked with Ted Cressy from National Grid on securing this grant. And it'll be, a lot of summer programming, continued again, that our students need from that programming. It's a great thing that National Grid has done for us these last several years.
Okay, thank you. So could I get a motion to approve item 10? I have a motion from Ms. Lima, second from Mr. Mather. Any discussion? We generally don't turn down grants. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We don't have anything else listed under new business, so look. Well,
I just want to, it's not new business, it's just a statement that I want to make, and this is awkward because I really do appreciate you guys' support, but the DEI subcommittee has brought forth 3 recommendations to the school committee. Not expecting a rubber stamp, but everything that's come forward has been denied, rejected, or pushed back. It's very easy to say that you support the work that committee is doing. It's a lot harder to actually make the decision. Again, not suggesting that we need a rubber stamp on everything, but I want us as a full committee to really think about our commitment to this program. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Okay, having reached the end of our agenda, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion from Ms. Lima, second Mr. Mather. All those in favor? Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to everyone who spoke at this evening's meeting.
Yeah, oh yeah.